Now, I tell you this, that's what's planned, but what we're finding is it's taking students sometimes 2 or 3 times longer to complete some of these activities. So even though we may have planned an activity that we believe takes 60 minutes, it might take 90 minutes or 2 hours to complete it, as everything takes just a little bit longer on the remote learning side. So, but approximately that's what we're working towards, are those time limits. We've also talked about grading and completion of work. And what we're trying to do is just be consistent at the various grade levels. And we've been pushing out some recommendations to our teachers on those issues. An update about food service. During the month of March, we served 23,000 meals. And then so far in April, we've surpassed that. So just for the days that we've had in April so far, we've served 24,000 meals. That's averaging about 1,100 to 1,300 meals per day. As we start to think about how we're supporting our students, I would tell you that what we're trying to stress with parents and families is not to get frustrated and to take time on this. And again, we understand this is a lot different than if kids were in school. So we're not able to replace exactly what is happening in schools, and we're encouraging families not to stress about that because we realize it's just different at home. I would also tell you that at each of our schools, the principals have established a team of folks that are analyzing engagement, and what they're looking for are kiddos that are not engaging, and then trying to make contacts with those families to figure out what the concern is if they're not engaging in remote learning. So those teams exist at every one of our schools in some sort of fashion. And then we know that internet access is a barrier for some of our families. We've done some work around that. Ray and Pat have found a source for some internet hotspots. Those were very difficult to come by, but we believe we may have some coming in this week, as many as 100 of them, to distribute to families that need those. So, and then we'll be ordering more of those as soon as we can. Just a couple of things about coordination. I just want the board to be aware of the coordination that's going on between the district and other agencies. I just don't want the board to believe that we're working in isolation, because we're really not. I have daily communication with the other city and county leaders, including the University of Montana. We are all talking about our response plans and trying to coordinate as much as we can. We have a weekly meeting with the city county health department. And then just last week, I started weekly meetings with the other AA superintendents around the state of Montana, just so that I can kind of understand, because the issues that we're faced with are very similar to what's going on in other AAs. Tomorrow, we'll be participating in the city county video that goes out. So if you tune into that video on a daily basis, the city, the mayor and one of the county commissioners do a video every day, and we're going to participate and give a district update tomorrow to our community. And on that note, as it relates to communication, Hatton and her team have done an excellent job keeping up the communication, trying to reach 2 to 3 emails per week to families. Also, both, when I say families, both parents, but also staff members as well, trying to get that communication out there as much as we can over email. Most all of our principals have done some sort of outreach, either through video or email. Many of our elementary principals are now producing weekly update videos for their communities. And as we go forward, we're looking to other options, perhaps a town hall style teleconference with our community or with our staff. Those are some of the things we're thinking about. And the last thing I'll just throw in for consideration, we do believe that it's important and necessary for us to focus some attention on our senior class. Obviously, none of us would want the end of the year to end this sort of way, but especially for our seniors, they already do a lot in terms of trying to prepare for the last few months, and this just adds a whole nother level of stress. What I would tell you is that, as I said before, each of our schools, including our high schools, have an intervention team that is specifically targeting senior students and trying to find those students that may be struggling with regards to completing their grad requirements, and trying to reach out to make sure that all students are on track. In the coming weeks, and perhaps at the next board meeting, I'll talk specifically to you about graduation, not only the graduation requirements, but also the graduation ceremony. And I just want to be clear that we have not made any decisions regarding the graduation ceremony. There's a lot of contingencies, obviously, as you're well aware. There will likely be restrictions regarding crowd size or large gatherings. We don't know what any of those restrictions might be, so I just think it's a little premature to make any sort of decisions regarding the graduation ceremonies. I know our high school principals have done some outreach and are collecting some ideas. We have a lot of various contingency plans in place, including virtual ceremonies or some other way to honor our seniors. I would tell you at this point, there's nothing off the table, but we're just trying to explore all options. And then I would imagine in the coming weeks, maybe 1 or 2 weeks from now, we'll get some more guidance, either from the governor's office or from our local county health department, that helps us make some decisions regarding those large group graduation ceremonies. So more to come on that. But the last thing I would say, just I really appreciate the work of our team. They've done an outstanding job in getting a lot of things stood up very, very quickly, including our remote learning program and our food delivery program. Just an outstanding job from not only members of cabinet, but also members of our entire team. A big shout out to our teaching staff. They've literally changed overnight in some situations from a traditional model to a remote learning model. And it's not easy and it's not perfect. And we're learning a little bit more each week to make it better. But I feel like we're doing a pretty good job right now. So that's all I have tonight. Just wanted to give you an update on those. And then I'll provide a written update at the next board meeting as an agenda item for discussion. Did we lose Marcia?
I didn't press my unmute button hard enough. Apologies. So we move on to 7A1, which is to approve the Seeley Lake sewer easement. We did hear about this at the March 10th board meeting. And so, Pat, do you want to let us know where this stands? The recommendation from administration is to approve the easement in the form attached to the agenda and reserve the discussion of the proposed compensation options for a later board meeting.
Yes, thank you. So the attachments begin on page 31 with the memorandum that was shared with the board last time when Gene Curtis from the Stewart District was present. The memorandum basically addresses the location, the new location for the proposed easement. I was just going to jump to the map, which is on page 33. And since the board packet went out, that map has been modified slightly. So it still represents the general scope of the easement, and you'll see that in the hatch markings next to the road. So if you look at the bottom of the map near the Great West logo, you'll see the area where the lift station would be located, and then you'll follow along Airport Road the location where the construction would take place to install the pipe. So how this easement would look differently is this. The portion of the easement that's near the lift station is much smaller than represented here. It actually is only about 2,600 square feet. And the reason it's smaller is that there already exists a pretty significant right-of-way along the road on that southern end. And the reason that exists is that there was a easement granted for the installation of the bridge a number of years ago, so that the scope of the right-of-way grew And so as the new map reflects, there's only about 2,600 square feet of permanent easement that would be near that lift station. Then alongside the road, that part is a temporary easement only for construction. It's only a 20-foot wide easement next to the right-of-way to help with construction. So that easement will go away following construction, and it doesn't begin to run near the lift station because of the expansion of the right-of-way. So the scope of the easement is less than is reflected on the diagram that's attached to the packet. It's still the same directional easement. It's still the same portion that's permanent, but that portion is smaller. And then the portion that's for construction that's temporary along the road is also smaller. But otherwise, that easement is reflected on the map there. The easement itself begins on page 34. Just point out a few things. First of all, we're the owner that's referenced in the easement. The sewer district is referenced as the district. We're often referenced as the district, so I wanted to make sure that's clear that we're the owner. You'll see that it references the temporary easement. The easement subject to covenants, easements, licenses, permits that are of record. We've added some modifications to this easement that were approved by the county, including on page 35. We added about middle of the way down an indemnity provision. So there's some indemnity by the district of this, by the sewer district of MCPS for liability arising out of the construction or maintenance of the easement. And then the last two paragraphs are also additional representations. One where we are not representing warranting title, and then the last one where we're making no representations as to the condition or state of the property. So just some pieces, some adjustments to the easement that are beneficial to us, but also reflective of the type of easement at play. And those were approved by the county. What still remains is a decision by the board about compensation or consideration, and whether that would come in the form of a payment for the easement or a future hookup fee. So that's been reserved for a future board meeting. That's all I have.
I just don't push it hard enough. Does anyone have any questions for Pat? I'll look in chat. I'm not seeing any. And I just got a text from Trustee Kendall that she was having some technical difficulties, but she's now joined by telephone. I just don't know which of the two phone numbers is hers. So I don't know if Trustee Kendall could unmute her phone and just let us know which of the numbers she is for voting purposes.
And Trustee Kendall, if you're attempting to unmute, you'll have to touch the keys *6 on your telephone, and that will unmute you.
I think I just did.
You did. Okay, so now I know which one is Trustee Vogel and which one is Trustee Kendall. Thank you both.
Excellent. Thank you.
And so there were no questions. So Trustee Lorenzen has moved to approve the Sealy Swan easement, and let's see if anyone has seconded. Sorry, it's just. And I see that Trustee Wake had also moved, so I will assume Trustee Wake would second it. Is that correct, Trustee Wake? Yes. Okay, so we have a seconded motion. Is there any board discussion?
And for the two trustees that are on the phone, if you'd like to have discussion, just press *6 to unmute yourself.
I'm not seeing any comments in chat. Let me just make sure I've made it to the bottom. And so no trustee comment or no trustee discussion. Is there any public comment? I'm just waiting a minute in case there's a lag. Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of the motion to approve the Sealy Swan easement, please indicate by typing in yes. And if you do not vote yes, please indicate your no vote. And then once I count those, if trustee Kendall and trustee Vogel could unmute and let us know how you vote.
Vogel votes yes.
Thank you.
Kendall votes yes.
Okay, so all trustees except trustee Newbold have voted yes. Trustee Newbold is abstaining because of a potential conflict of interest. So there's one abstention, and all trustees other than trustee Newbold have voted yes, so the motion passes. Let me just turn my page. So the next one is 8A1, which is to approve a grant application summary. Dr. Guest, do you want to explain in a little more detail what the grant is about?
I'd be happy to. The application is found on page 37. And really, this is an amazing opportunity for us to apply for a literacy grant that is provided through OPI, which allocates a significant amount of money, excuse me, $600,000 each year for the next 4 years. And what's exciting about the grant is it's really focused on helping to support our instructional practices around literacy, especially for those students who are identified in groups that are considered disadvantaged. So children who are homeless, children who may have some learning needs, and so on. And so it allows us an opportunity to really analyze our practice, look at our data, and help to identify some really strong strategic interventions and support for students. The next thing that's really exciting about this grant is typically the grants are kindergarten up to high school, and this grant specifically includes pre-kindergarten. So it includes our students who attend Jefferson, and there's a huge emphasis in our practices for how we help support our students in preparation for elementary school. The last kind of major emphasis of the grant is partnerships within our community to ensure that all of the needs of our children are being met, and really including those different partners to help support the learning needs of our children. So it's an exciting application. It's really robust and competitive. And so fingers crossed that with your approval, we're awarded this great financial support for really looking deeper into some of our practices around literacy.
Are there any, trustee Decker, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Guest. What an exciting and really generous opportunity in this grant. I'm curious about whether this grant would fund any new positions or staff because it's such a significant amount of money.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yes, I should have included a couple things that we've begun to write into the grant. So for example, the grant includes personnel. So personnel including additional instructional coaches who would help really bridge a seamless transition from Jefferson into our elementaries, elementary to middle, middle to high, and really include that transition that is seamless and thoughtful for our kids so that we don't lose them along that pathway. Some additional personnel would also include a kind of literacy coach coordinator to really ensure that what we're doing is streamlined and it's explicit and really data informed, and making sure that we don't lose any kids along the way and that our teachers and leaders are really set up for success. I guess at this point, I'd also say that the grant includes some opportunities for allowing us to extend some of our assessment practices down to pre-K and past grade 9. So currently we use STAR assessment to benchmark students to understand how they're doing along the way and to catch those kids who may be falling behind. This allows us to extend our assessment practices to really get a full continuum for our students. And lastly, it allows us to purchase additional materials that come along with strong instructional coaching that really enhances our teachers' instructional practices and allows for us to really hone in on professional development and how that supports the enhancement of instruction in the classroom and thus the literacy improvements of our students.
And Trustee Smith has a question, but I don't think his mic is working.
Oh,
Dr.
Can you
Gibb.
hear me?
Oh, good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Guest. My question was just regarding the appropriation, 600,000 times 4 years. That's 2.4. That's great, fantastic. Thank you for finding that. Is it an all or nothing, or is it a, is it an all or nothing, or would it be? It just seems like an awful lot of money for OPI to be put into one district. Is it a much bigger fund? And
it is. It's from it's federal funding for ESSA. And so we have an opportunity to be competitive with a wide variety of districts across the state. We were invited to apply because of our data and our data showing that we have some subgroup populations of students who need additional attention and support, and the funding would certainly provide that support and kind of focused attention to meet those needs. And so there was a couple AA districts I know around the state who were invited to apply. And obviously with our invitation, we decided that even amongst everything else that's going on, this was just an opportunity that we couldn't let pass without giving it our best shot. And so in thinking about how the funds are given each year, in the application, it does say percentages of funds and how they're allocated per level. So if you'll notice, 15% is given to pre-K, 40% is given to elementary. So that right there is a huge portion of the money that's really delivered to early literacy. So I see Grace shaking her head because I know this is your game, but this is all about really supporting students in the early literacy and the early pathway to catch them up and to keep them engaged and supported along the way. Then there's another 40% that's given to middle and high, where we really want to then address the foundational literacy skills that they may be missing and to make sure they're caught up in time to earn credit towards graduation. And then the last 5% is just the indirect costs of managing a grant and working with OPI.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee Newbold has a question.
Thanks. This might be getting a little bit down into the weeds, but just a question about our dyslexic learners and whether there's any component of this grant funding that would specifically address assessment or professional development or curriculum for those students.
Absolutely. That's a really good question. And I'm remiss that I didn't add that into the beginning portion of the introduction of this grant. Absolutely. And thinking about early literacy, a huge focus in pre-K is around oral language development and the pre-skills you need before ever even learning to read. And then the second emphasis in K2 around those skills that are needed, the phonics, phonemic awareness, all those things that happen in K2 that then have additional interventions for children who are presenting some possible concerns or needs that are presented like dyslexia. So absolutely, we identified some materials that are research-based that have strong evidence that are supported by professionals in that world. So I think it's exciting, and it's all kind of the second level of what we already are doing in our classrooms. So it's a second kind of more increased intervention that addresses those needs. So absolutely it is included, and the research is there behind the materials. It's right now in K5, we use independent reading level assessment called the IRLA. The second level to that is called the foundational toolkit, which was informed and helped written by some of the leaders in that world. So it's really exciting, and it was a coup because some of what our special education teachers are reading about and learning about with the leadership of Karen Allen directly relates to this. And so it's a perfect tie-in and a match to what we're trying to achieve in those early grades.
Is there any other questions for Dr. Guest? I'm just waiting for a sec. No questions, so Trustee Wake has moved to approve the grant application. And thanks, Dr. Guest, for this wonderful opportunity. It was seconded by Trustee Smith. Is there any board discussion? If anyone wants to unmute and say anything, I will go over to that pile. Yes, Grace and wants to say something, and then
Yes.
Trustee Smith indicated that he supports this motion.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that the focus on disadvantaged students, I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense that a significant portion of the grant, I mean, when you consider the number of students that we're currently able to serve with pre-K, this is a really significant piece of this that's going to support those particular identified students. We certainly hope that over the coming years, we'll be able to serve more in that pre-K band as well. I wanted to just make a suggestion. I don't know what the opportunities for partnership are, but as best practices are identified and being implemented in MCPS, it'd be fantastic to try to bridge to the rest of our early childhood community around those practices, because we know that we don't have a pre-K system that serves all incoming students into MCPS, and some of our more disadvantaged kids would really benefit from that early great literacy work that you'll be developing. And so anything that I or others can do to get some of that information out to the early childhood community would be a fantastic way to leverage this resource.
I don't know if it's okay for protocol, but Grace, we did include that in a family engagement section about some strategies and identification of our community partners. So absolutely, that was worthy of a lot of points in the application.
Is there any other board discussion? Trustee Lorenzen, did you want to speak, or were you voting on the motion? I see. Okay. So we have a seconded motion and we've had discussion by board members. Is there any public comment? And seeing none, then all trustees please indicate by typing in Y or yes, or N for no, or some other position. And then Trustees Vogel and Kendall, if you can unmute and let us know.
Vogel votes yes.
Trustee Kendall? Trustee Kendall appears to be unmuted, but I don't hear her. Can anyone else hear her?
No, I can't hear her either. Trustee Kendall, you are unmuted. You don't have to push anything on your keypad. You should be able to just speak. Okay, I'll do some offline technical support and see if I can get that figured out.
I'm texting her right now, so I will get her vote just a second.
No, I'm unmuted. Well, she said.
Oh, good. So Trustee Kendall, how do you vote on the motion?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I vote yes.
Okay, so that means the motion carries unanimously, and I'm sure we all want to thank Dr. Guest for this great opportunity. And thank you for finding this opportunity for us, our district. And so now we move on to 8B1, and it is to authorize Resolution 2020-11E, a declaration of election by acclamation. It's a K-12 action item, it looks like, Pat. And if you want to, I think some of the trustees have seen this in past meetings about this time of year, but if you want to generally just explain what this action item is, where the recommendation is to approve the resolution.
You bet. Thank you. Yeah, so we have an action item for the elementary and for the high school The statute authorizes the cancellation of an election when the number of open seats is equal to or when the number of candidates is equal to or less than the number of open seats. So we have that in both the elementary and the high school this year. We had 2 open seats in the elementary. There were 2 candidates. And in the high school, there was 1 open seat and 1 candidate. So the election notice or the notice of cancellation was sent outside the statutory time frame or within the statutory time frame. And now the opportunity for the trustees is to declare the election by acclamation. This doesn't mean that we seat the trustees. They're not actually seated until after the term of the existing trustees expires in May. But this is basically the recognition of them as the prevailing candidate for those open seats.
Does anyone have any questions of Pat? I do have one, Pat. So it's a vote of just the K-12 trustees?
So the first resolution is the elementary trustees, and then the second is the K-12, right?
Okay. So let me get back to chat. Is there a motion? There is a motion by trustee Lorenzen, and it's been seconded by trustee Decker, and I'm assuming the motion is to approve resolution 2020-11E, which authorizes the declaration of election by acclamation for the 2 open elementary trustee seats. And that's been clarified by trustee Lorenzen, who made the motion. Is there any board discussion? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, then if everyone can vote in the manner in which we've been voting. And trustee Kendall and trustee Vogel.
Do I vote since this is an elementary action?
Yes, thank you for reminding me.
Mm-hmm. This is Heidi. I vote yes.
Okay, and so trustee Sturbis, trustee Holland, trustee Wake, and trustee Vogel didn't vote. It is unanimous as to the trustees who sit on the K-12 board. And then I need to clarify something, since I realized that I'm voting yes. I have been voting yes, but I haven't been typing in yes. So the record has not yet reflected my vote. So I don't know if there's a way to go back and let me put a Y in for my yes votes for the motions on which I could vote. This is one that I can't, and I just realized that oversight. So is that okay?
Yeah, we can't necessarily add. We could go back and add that into the chat, or you could verbally acknowledge it, just as you did just now.
I think that's sufficient if I just verbally, but I did vote yes on any motion that I could vote on. I didn't vote on this motion.
Great.
So, is there any discussion? Oh, trustee, let me just vote. So trustee Wade has moved to adopt the resolution. Whoops. Oh, she's already ahead of us. So we have the motion on the first item is unanimous as to all trustees who could vote. And then we move on to B2. And it looks like before we identify that as the next topic of discussion, there's already been a motion. But let's let Pat just explain what B2 is about before I acknowledge the motion and the sections that have been made.
Sure. So similar to the elementary resolution, this one is with the open.
I don't know if I have public comment on the last motion. So I'll just give a chance for anyone that wanted to make public comment on the last motion? Oh, and Trustee Smith said I did. Sorry, it's a little hard to keep track of everything. Okay, so now we are back to Pat. Thanks, Pat.
You bet. So similar to the elementary, the number of candidates was equal to or less than the open seats. There was actually one open seat, the District D seat that's occupied by Jennifer Vogel, and the Jennifer ran unopposed, and so that seat can also be declared by acclamation. The election in the high school similarly was canceled.
Any questions? See none. Now I'll identify that Trustee Wake has moved to adopt Resolution 2020-9S, and it has been seconded by Trustee Lorenzen. Is there any board discussion? I'll just welcome back Trustee Vogel. Thank you for running.
Thank you.
Any public comment? Seeing none, then if everyone could either vote yes or no on the motion, and I will remember to vote this time.
Vogel votes yes.
Thank you. And Trustee Kendall?
Yes, I vote yes.
So let me double check. It appears that everyone has voted yes, so the motion carries unanimously. And then we move on to B3. And even though the topic says approve purchase of a generator, I believe, Ray, it's not really an action item, but you just wanted us to be aware of it because it falls underneath the spending limit for items that need to be brought to the budget. Let me know, Pat or Ray, if that's not correct.
That's correct.
Okay, so Ray, do you want to explain about the backup generator?
I'm going to let Burley start. If I
Okay.
need to fill in on the technology side, I will do that.
Sure, I wasn't sure who was going to talk. Okay, Burley?
Yeah, thank you. So as Madam Chair stated, that this is an informational item. It is under $80,000, but we thought it would be necessary to bring it to the board because it's kind of a unique purchase. We've had a need for this for some time, and in the bond language, it states that the district should improve the functionality of technology and other systems. What this generator will allow us to do is, for the business building, allow us to have uninterrupted services for those systems, which is very, very important to continue for the district operation.
Okay, I see that you did receive a bid from J&M Electric in the amount of $55,000 to supply and install the generator. Did you say that?
Yeah.
Catch it?
Yes, we did. So this would be a generator that would be connected to the backside of the building, and in the event of a power outage, would continue to run our building. As long as the generator run, it would be hooked to natural gas. It would be able to run for an extended period of time.
Thanks. Ray, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Burley said it. I just think with all the bond work that we've done in the critical infrastructure and system upgrades we've made, it makes sense to have a generator that will keep things going in the event of a power outage.
Thanks. Any questions for Burley or Ray from any trustee? I'm not seeing any. And as I indicated, this isn't an action item, but Burley and Ray wanted the board to know that they were taking this step. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for being proactive and planning for the unexpected, since that seems to be going on a bit these days. So thank you both very much. And with that, we'll move on to 4, which is the network electronics bid. And so this is also information only. Is that correct, Ray?
That's correct. Back on oh goodness, in a March board meeting. Sorry, I've got the tiny agenda on my phone. we request, Yes, we requested proposals for E-rate concerns for our network electronics. So we purchased access points for 3 elementary schools because it is time to start refreshing those, if you can believe it or not. And so I just wanted to let you know that it was for the amount of $55,509.16. And that bid was awarded to Access Consulting. And a contract was complete. And so hopefully we will get our E-rate approval, and that's it.
Okay. Any questions for Ray? Seeing none, again, thank you for following up on this and for letting us know how it turned out. Thank you very much, Ray. Now we move on to 5, which is an action item and is to authorize engagement for internal wiring for the administration building. And it looks like, Ray, this is your topic to explain to us.
It is. So this is the last internal wiring bid that I will be bringing to you, hopefully for a very long time. We got 3 bids for this project from 3 local companies, and We Connect was the low bidder with $125,252.20. And I do want to note that that bid was lower than the estimated cost that was used to budget in the overall budget for wiring for the admin buildings.
Any questions for Ray? Seeing none, then is there a motion to authorize the engagement of We Connect for services associated with the internal wiring for the administration building, subject to successful negotiations of a contract? Trustee Smith has moved and Trustee Oldperson has seconded the motion. Is there any board discussion? I'm not seeing anything other than a thank you from Trustee Smith to Ray. Is there any public comment? Not seeing anyone online unmuting their phone. Then all trustees in favor of the motion, please indicate by typing in yes, or in the case of those on the phone, unmuting and indicating how you vote. And please indicate yes or no. And I will remember to type me in too.
This is Heidi. I vote yes.
Thank you. Trustee Vogel?
Vogel votes yes.
Okay, so it appears that from the list and the 2 oral yeses that the motion carries and it was unanimously approved. Then we move on to C1, which is the personnel report. This is the report that we see on a monthly basis and is found beginning on page 40. Is there anything that you'd like to point out, Dave, that's of note?
No, it's a smaller report this month.
Okay, any questions for Dave? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the items on the provided personnel report? I had to scroll down a little bit, sorry. I'm just making sure I'm down in the very bottom. Trustee Smith made the motion, which was seconded by Trustee Newbold. Is there any board discussion? And as you know, we don't discuss particular individuals named in the personnel report, but just general discussion. Any public comment? And again, the same limitations apply. See none, then all those in favor of the motion, please indicate yes, and those opposed, please indicate by no. And the 2 trustees on the phone, please indicate orally your vote.
Vogel votes yes.
And this is Heidi. I vote yes.
Then the motion passes unanimously. And now we move on to C2. This, I think, every spring, or at least at some point during the year, and it's or It's to approve the wage salary increase for the summer and seasonal workers. I don't know if we've seen it every year, but we see it on a regular basis. So do you want to explain what's going on in terms
Yeah,
of?
there's two things that are suggested this year or recommended this year. One is increasing the seasonal lawn care workers wage from $9.50 an hour to $11 an hour. And that was based on recommendations from Burley and his need to hire people. The other thing that we wanted to add this year was a longevity piece to it, which we've not had previously. And the way that would work is that for any employee that's in a seasonal place for the 5 continuous years would also get a 50-cent an hour differential as well.
Any questions for Dave? So as I understand it, that administration's recommendation is that there be a motion to increase the summer seasonal lawn care workers from $9.50 per hour to $11 per hour. And in that same motion, it would be also to approve compensating summer and seasonal employees with 5 years of continuous service or more with a 50-cent per hour differential.
Correct.
It's been moved by Trustee Smith and seconded by Trustee Newbold. Is there any word discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes or no. And the 2 telephone participants, please indicate orally.
Vogel is yes.
Kendall is yes.
Turn down to the bottom of the chat list. And the motion carries unanimously. Now, excuse me for the crinkled papers. I'm just turning the page in my agenda. The next topic is to request an exception to Board Policy 3110, entrance placement and transfer. And Karen, I'm assuming this is someone who will be 19 by the time she graduates. Is that correct? I don't know if it's a he or she, but there is a her used in the recommendation. So I assume it's a her. Is Karen on?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was having that problem. Yes, you are absolutely correct. It's a high school student.
Any questions for Karen? So the administration recommends a motion to grant a waiver of the age limitation for the student identified by initials in our agenda. Is there such a motion? Trustee Decker has moved and Trustee Smith has double moved, so we'll consider that a second. And any board discussion? Any public comment? See none, then all trustees, please indicate whether you vote yes or no as to the motion that's on the table.
Vogel votes yes.
Kendall votes yes.
And I think that's everyone, so the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And now we come to the list of calendars for 2021 years. There are 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think these the last ones we're approving, or are there a few more to come?
No, this would represent all of the remaining calendars for the 2021 school year.
Okay, so the first one is to approve early kindergarten learning program calendar, which is found on page 50. Anything that you note on that, Dave?
No, I would just let everybody know that all 4 calendars were done and they correspond with what our district, the earlier elementary and high school calendars were like in terms of starting dates, breaks, PIRs within the district. They all aligned, including parent-teacher conferences as well. So we made sure that they would not be in conflict with the ones that had previously been approved in January.
Any questions for Dave? Seeing none, then this is a K-12 or elementary action item. So is there a motion to approve the early kindergarten learning program calendar that's found in our agenda? Trustee Lorenzen has moved to do so. And let's see, I kind of got mixed up. Trustee Smith has moved to do so, and Trustee has seconded the motion. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, then all elementary trustees, please indicate how you're voting by typing in your yes or your no. And Trustee Kendall, if you can indicate how you vote.
Kendall votes yes.
And the motion carries unanimously as to all elementary trustees. Then we move on. Oh, I don't think I took public comment. I'm apologizing. It's just hard to remember. So public comment. Then if there is public comment, we can go back and revote. Seeing none. Then the next one is 5, which is to approve Jefferson preschool program calendar for 2020 to 2021. Anything of note about this one, Dave?
No, it correlates with the others, as I said.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none, then is there a motion from an elementary trustee to approve the Jefferson preschool program calendar? I'm not seeing any motion. Oh, there we go. There's a motion by Trustee Smith and a second by Trustee Lorenzen. And is there any board discussion? Any public comment? All elementary trustees, please indicate your vote by either indicating yes or no. And then Trustee Kendall, if you can orally provide your vote.
Kendall votes yes.
Just wanted to make sure that I've got everybody. Yes, it's a unanimous as to all elementary trustees. Then we move on to 6, which is the Sealy Swan High School calendar. Is there anything of note about this calendar? I know they're on a different school day structure in Sealy, but does that impact the high school calendar?
They did a nice job of aligning it with what our district calendar is for high school. So they'll be partaking in the same district professional training PD days that our regular high schools have as well. They are on a 4-day week, but they also have put in there, you'll note, each month has a Friday that they will also be attending as well.
Okay. Any questions for Dave? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the Sealy Swan High School 2020 to 2021 school year calendar? Just wait, sorry, trying to scroll down. It's moved by Trustee Smith, seconded by Trustee McDonald. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor, please indicate by voting for yes or no, and Trustee Vogel and Kendall, if you can indicate your vote orally. Thanks.
Vogel votes yes.
Thank you.
Kendall votes yes.
Thanks. I don't see that Trustee Lorenzen has voted yet. Okay, so Trustee Lorenzen voted yes, so the motion passes unanimously. Now we move on to approving Willard Alternative High School calendar for 2020 2021. We're also on a slightly different schedule recently. We wanted to this calendar.
No, the Willard calendar aligns with our existing high school calendar for the 2021 year and starting and ending dates.
Okay. Any questions for Dave? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the Willard Alternative High School calendar? It's moved by Trustee Smith, second by Trustee Lorenzen. Any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor, please indicate by voting yes or no. And if Trustee Vogel and Kendall can vote orally.
Vogel votes yes. Kendall votes yes.
Oh, I need to vote, just a second. So the motion passes unanimously. And I'm trying to get closer to my speaker because Trustee Newbold said it was hard to hear me, so I apologize. We now move on to 7, which is COVID-19 emergency policy.
8.
Pardon?
8.
Oh, 8. Sorry. Thank you. I should know how to read Roman numerals. So we're on to COVID-19 emergency policies. Dr. Watson and Pat, I don't know who's going to take the lead on this one.
I can definitely start, and then I'll let Pat jump in. So it's interesting. These policies are recommended from the Montana School Boards Association. They've created a whole other section of policy in our policies. So generally the 1000 series are board policies or policies that relate to trustees. This one starts at 1900. We don't have anything up that goes up that high. So it seems like appropriate spot to put these, but these policies are intended to be short-term for emergencies like this. So that's really the purpose for recommending these. We anticipate that we may need to use some of these in the coming weeks. So that's our motivation around these. So I'll let Pat go and start talking about the first one.
Thanks, Pat.
Sure. As Superintendent Watson mentioned, these are recommendations from the School Boards Association. Significantly, they have self-executing dissolution of these policies as they run during the emergency declared by the organizations that are identified, the only organizations, including the board, that could declare an emergency. The first one is more broad in nature, and it primarily outlines within the bottom paragraph the fact that these policies run concurrent with an emergency declaration. So that's the function of the 1900 policy. It's possible, and I saw today that MTSBA has recommended another policy related or in this series, temporary type policy regarding grading. That's not before the board right now, but as Superintendent Watson mentioned, there could be others that would come before the board that would fit within this one reading setup. So that was all I had in addition to add.
Any questions for Dr. Watson? Trustee Smith has a question.
Yeah, I don't know if this is for, actually, I think it is for Dr. Watson. I'm not sure if this is appropriate, and I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but is there any, maybe it's in a different policy or maybe it's not in, doesn't have to be in this one, but is there kind of a hierarchy of operating the district in case you get, or, you know, what happens? Is there an automatic way to take care of that? And I'm not wishing this on anyone.
Are you saying that if for whatever reason I couldn't fulfill my responsibilities, does it automatically go to somebody else? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Is or does it even matter, or is it in a different policy? Or
Yeah, that's a great question, Trustee Smith. I'm not aware of anything in policy. My sense would be, and Pat can correct me if I'm wrong, but if for whatever reason I was unable to fulfill the responsibilities of the position, that the board would have to call an emergency meeting and appoint an interim superintendent. That's what I've seen done before in other circumstances. Now, absence of myself, I've asked our team members to all identify a backup, but that's different than my position. So Pat can assign a backup and get my approval to have that backup serve for Pat's job. But my position is a little different because I'm hired by the board. So my sense is that if I went down, that you would have to have a special meeting and appoint interim superintendent. But Pat, do you have any other thoughts on that?
No, I think it would, I don't have any additional thoughts. I think that this structure would provide short-term, but if it's a long-term type of thing, then the board would have to step in to appoint an interim.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have just one or kind of a piece of information. I did check with Bia Calaba, our attorney, about the board being able to adopt policies with just one reading, and she indicated that we can, and this would be the type of emergency situation where we would do it on one reading as opposed to two. I just wanted to throw that out there. Any other questions? None? Then let me turn over the page. Sorry, I'm just shuffling the paper so I can read. So the recommendation is to approve first reading in the topic, but the recommendation is to adopt board policy 1900 COVID-19 emergency policy after this one reading. Is there such a motion? It's moved by Trustee Smith and seconded by Trustee Oldperson. Is there any board discussion? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, then if each trustee can vote either yes or no for the motion, let's put on the board. Thank you, Steve. Kendall and Vogel, if you can vote orally.
Vogel votes yes.
Kendall votes yes.
And let me double check that I've got everybody. Yes, everyone has voted yes. So the motion passes unanimously. Then we move on to B, which is to approve first reading of board policy 1901, use of transportation funds during periods of school closure. Is something that Pat or Dr. Watson want to explain? I'm assuming this also might have come from a source that looks like maybe the Office of Public Instruction.
Pat, do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so 1901 is in this first of those series that were referenced in policy 1900. This one references the transportation fund and outlines the various flexibilities authorized by OPI to expend that fund. So this policy would exist during this period of emergency and offers those bulleted areas as options for use of the transportation fund in expenditures. And you'll see that the use is quite broad, and it does link back to state statute. This too was recommended by MTSBA. And among those various bulleted points, we're certainly utilizing a number of them and could potentially use the transportation fund to support some of those services, the delivery of food, the internet services and access, technological equipment, that type of thing. So this just outlines, identifies sort of an expanded scope of expenditures that we could utilize the transportation fund for. And as referenced in the previous policy, this would also would expire at the end of the declared emergency.
Trustee Smith has a question.
Thank you, Pat. I'm really glad to say or to see that we're using the transportation for the food and the meals. My question has to do with how does this, or does it affect, if we use it for stuff that's not transportation related but is important, does that affect our contract with Beach? Are we creating a hole that we have to fill some other way, or are they just out of luck? How does that work?
Yeah, so and I'm sorry, I missed maybe the first part of the question, but it's about using those proceeds and how it might affect the contractors. So we're currently in conversations with Beach just in regards to the types of costs that we would look to continue to pay the contractor to pay Beach. I think that what we had anticipate is bringing that back to the board in terms of what we ultimately come to terms with. We're approaching the conversations with Beach with the expectation that the board would support covering their costs of their staff and their pay. So that's been our initial discussion with them and an initial expectation. Of course, we would share that with the board at the appropriate time, but we certainly interpreted the governor's order as encompassing the Beach as sort of an essential service provider, and it makes sense. If we started transporting students, we want to make sure that they have bus drivers ready to go, and they couldn't get bus drivers trained fast enough if they happen to lose them during this period of time. It would extend beyond bus drivers to include also essential staff. But we're still having those conversations, and we'll be back with the board. But there certainly are some costs that won't be incurred as a result of not transporting our regular routes, certainly fuel costs and the like. So there's anticipated to be a certain level of savings that would happen in the transportation fund.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question. Marcia, this is Heidi.
Okay, Trustee Kendall?
Yeah, I agree with Mike's comment that this is that we're doing a really good job with the meals and stuff, and I appreciate that. Will these emergency policies stay on our books even though they expire? And I'm asking that because I wonder if, I hope nothing like this happens again in the near future, but it might be useful to have these things stay on our policy books in the future if necessary. So that's my question. Will they stay?
They're currently set up to expire at the end of the emergency declaration, certainly within the board's discretion to, at that time, even to modify the language that would make them effective. For instance, if the board declared a state of emergency, or even if these other organizations did the declaration of a state of emergency, it's certainly a possibility, and it's not an unreasonable approach because the intent of the policy is just to broaden the flexibility that's available to function.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, it's the recommendation from the administration that we adopt Board Policy 1901, use of transportation funds during periods of school closure after this reading. Is there such a motion? I see Trustee Smith has made a motion. Is there, and Trustee Oldperson has seconded it. Is there any board discussion? I will make one comment somewhat related to what Trustee Kendall said. Perhaps at some point we can meet with board council and see if there might be a need to have a broader worded provision for unexpected circumstances. And we can talk with them about that, but this is, I think, specific to COVID-19. Any public comment? Seeing none, people are starting to vote. So please indicate your vote in chat by voting yes or no, and Trustee Vogel and Trustee Kendall, if you can vote orally.
Kendall votes yes.
Vogel votes yes.
Thank you. And I think everyone else has voted, so the motion passes unanimously. And now we move on to a recommendation for a first reading of Board Policy 2422, Student Instructional Proficiency. And Pat, you're listed as the person that will provide the explanation for the recommendation for a first reading of Board Policy 2422.
All right, thank you. And right, this is a two reading policy, so it doesn't fit in those emergency policies. We don't currently have a proficiency-based policy. So what this policy allows and allows the superintendent or designee to do is to base the movement of students through the school upon proficiency rather than instructional hours. And that is relevant in the context of A and B and determining which students qualify as students under our A and B calculation for school funding purposes. So the statute references instructional hours. We have two enrollment counts for A and B. And if the hours of instruction are less than what's reflected in the statute for those counts, then we get reduced or diminished A and B. This alternative came into play a couple of legislative sessions ago where it's a proficiency-based determination rather than a instructional hour determination. This exists in statute, and this policy was put together really based upon the model that came through BIA's office and through MTSBA's office. It's a bit more generic than the MTSBA policy. It gives some latitude for the superintendent to establish procedures to define proficiency, which I think is important, especially as we progress with this COVID-19 issue. This really doesn't apply right now because the governor's order has waived the instructional hours requirement. It could apply if the order is lifted and the board continues emergency closure. Then we would look to this proficiency-based determination to support our counting of students for A and B purposes. Hopefully that makes sense.
I see Trustee Decker has a question.
Thank you. I am curious about how this change will impact gifted students or the ability of students to test into different grade levels. I'm just curious about some of the other types of impacts beyond the question of students and how they complete this particular school year.
I think I can answer that, Pat. I do actually believe this is a useful policy to have in place. It allows us as administration to sort of define that proficiency can look differently than just seat time. And so that does open the door to other opportunities, not only for gifted students, but for students in, just for example, in high school that may be progressing faster in a particular course or slower, that, you know, that when they're not tied to the seat time, but we can measure proficiency in another way. The one example that I used earlier this year with Pat and Dan Parrish, our accounting supervisor, you know, we have a lot of students that graduate in 6 semesters. And if we have a proficiency definition like this, we may actually be able to count those students, even though they're not here for their senior year. We might still be able to count them as a senior in our count because they've demonstrated proficiency after 3 years rather than 4 years. So that's just one example of how we might be able to use this into the future.
It looks like Trustee Smith has a question.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I think Dr. Watson just addressed it, and that's kind of what I was thinking of, what Grace had said too. And I think a kind of another example I'm thinking of is sometimes if kids, whether they be placing out or you know, advanced in some things, they'll need only a few classes in their last semester and wouldn't normally qualify for a full A and B student. Is that kind of the same thing that you were just saying, Rob? And I think you did already answer that.
Yeah, fairly similar to that. What's interesting is this policy has come from the School Boards Association, and the definition encouraged by the School Boards Association. What we're finding out is that sometimes the Office of Public Instruction doesn't see that definition the same way. So the Office of Public Instruction is the folks that actually do the counting and provide the funding related to the counting. So there has been a little bit of pushback from the Office of Public Instruction when we try to get too far out of the boundaries. I guess I'll just leave it at that.
And Trustee Smith had a follow-up question.
Yeah, and actually, Rob, you just reminded me of the second part of my question. If the A and B really, it's OPI that has to approve it. If we approve this policy, does that automatically fulfill us, or do they then have to also approve it, or
they do? Yeah, they do. What this policy allows us to do, though, is justify what we're doing. Okay. So we're not out there on the edge as administrators saying, you know, this student is proficient, you need to count them as if they were a full-time student. What this policy allows us to say is, yes, even before we had this student, we knew that we had the possibility of measuring proficiency in a different way. And it's not just seat time, because in the Montana Code Annotated, everything's related to instructional minutes. But if the trustees have a policy like this in place, then we can measure proficiency in a different way, and it's not just instructional minutes. But again, you're right, Trustee Smith, the Office of Public Instruction would have to go along with our definition of proficiency and our count as related to that.
All right, thank you, appreciate it.
And Trustee Decker has another question.
Thank you. And I think Dr. Watson got at this a little bit in your last question, but I guess what I'm wondering is if there are certain types of courses or classes that there's not a way to measure proficiency without the time component or requirements. You often hear about seniors who will say things like, I only have this one class. Like there are certain classes, and it seems as though the way that it works now, there's not really a way to demonstrate proficiency via like a test or an exam, or like our system isn't really set up to support those things. And so I'm wondering in actual practice, what this might look like for especially like mid-high school students as they consider their options about their future paths.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I agree with you. Our system is not set up that way. I think what this allows us to do is consider other options and start talking to our teaching staff about other options related to proficiency. And obviously, all of that stuff would have to be vetted through our teaching staff and our teaching and learning department and our school administrators. But I think what this allows us to do is really just start having that discussion. Like, we don't necessarily have to define proficiency as just seat time, because that's how we are defining it right now. It's not only seat time, but it's a passing grade. So if I have a passing grade plus I put the instructional minutes, the required instructional minutes, both of those things together gives me credit in high school. But there's other ways to measure credit other than just seat time. And actually, I'll be honest, some of our programs are already doing this. So our Willard program, I know, looks at other factors than just seat time and allows kids to progress faster or slower, depending on what they need.
I'm just checking, are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any. So the recommendation is for a motion to approve the first reading of Board Policy 2422 and authorize it to be posted for public comment, with the expectation that the trustees would look to approve it at the second reading on May 12th at the board meeting. And so there has been a motion by Trustee Decker and a second by Trustee Sturtis. There's a number of people doing those things, but I'm just going to look and see first in the punishment. And so there's a seconded motion. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Oh, Trustee Decker has a comment today.
Sorry, yes, thanks. I just want to say this is a complex topic, and one this crisis sort of has brought, it seems, to the fore as we try to support students in this really unusual time. But like a lot of changes across our society that may be being revealed or emerging as needs, this has the potential to support students in new ways for the long haul. So I really applaud the administration for taking this step, for being willing to engage in what are surely going to be some really difficult, thoughtful, pedagogical kinds of conversations, but really with the goal of trying to meet kids where they are in their educational journey in a more authentic way, which I find from the perspective of gifted students and also challenged, struggling students, to be really valuable. And I'm thankful. So thank you for putting this forward.
Any other trustee comments or discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of, and I see that Ms. Ballou indicated she was going to comment, but that Trustee Decker captured the comments she wanted to make. So thank you for that public comment that was done online. Let's now take the vote. So all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. And the two trustees on the phone, if you can do an oral vote, yes or no.
Vogel votes yes.
Kendall votes yes.
And let me double check. That's everybody has voted yes, so the motion passes unanimously. So it will be posted for public comment, and we will see it again at the first school board meeting in May. Then we move on to D, which is a board topic. It seems like it was 100 years ago, but it was only in January that we discussed that we would have trustee or superintendents Watson's evaluation done at the second board meeting in March, which typically involves an executive session as well as completing the tool that we agreed we would use again this year. And in light of everything else that has been going on, I'd like to make a recommendation to the board to see if this process works for you. If you haven't got, or you don't have access to, some people have asked me to resend it. If you haven't got the evaluation tool and the superintendent job description, just text me or call me and I will resend it to you. If you can fill it in and include any comments that you'd like Trustee Watson to see, because there is sections where there is a comment opportunity, then what we have done in the past in executive session is have an oral discussion. But in talking with Hatton and Ray and Superintendent Watson, it's pretty difficult to imagine how we could have an executive session electronically and remotely. So I would propose to the board that this year, under these circumstances, that everyone mail to my home your evaluations or email them to my email address. I will compile the written evaluation that I submit for Superintendent Watson's personnel file, which is a numeric average of what assessment has been given by each individual trustee. And then what has been done in the past is I provide the written forms to the superintendent. In past years it was trustee or superintendent thing, so that any comments or information you want to share with Dr. Watson would be made available to him. Those are not put in his personnel file. Those are simply for a conversation or information to be shared with him. And so I would ask the trustees, I guess, for a motion that we follow this procedure for this 1 year only and not meet an executive session and do the evaluations through the evaluation tool, with the understanding that I will follow the procedures that I've used in past years, which is to provide a singular paper or document for his personnel file, and then provide him with all the evaluation forms for his review. And there is a, Trustee Sturbis has a question, and Trustee Newbold indicated, is there a date by which you'd like that submitted? I would like to have it submitted within, let's say, the next week, only because at a certain point, we're going to have some changes on the board in May. So maybe by the end of April. So I'll add that in. If that we complete the superintendent evaluation in the process I just described and have them sent to me postmarked by April 30th, or how many days there are in April. Okay, I see that Diane had made a motion that we complete the superintendent evaluation as I just described, and it's been seconded by Trustee Wake. Is there any board discussion?
Could I do my question, Marcia?
Sure, sorry, I didn't see, yes, please ask your question. I got sidetracked with the later.
So I was wondering if there'd be at some point in the future that we could evaluate the evaluation tool that we're currently using, because I find that there are certain topics that I really don't feel like we get enough information to provide a way to evaluate it. So I was just wondering, in the future, could we all look at the evaluation tool?
Yes, we actually did talk about that back at the January 14th meeting, and I think I'd indicated, but I'll have to go back and look at the minutes, that we would be looking at this evaluation tool, maybe over the summer or early fall. But since it was the one that was in place, and that the superintendent had notice of, that we just use it this year, but I believe we did discuss it, that we would be looking at this tool again and see if it's a different or better evaluation mechanism. So we'll keep that on as a discussion item for a later board meeting. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I didn't know if I answered your question. So we have a motion from Trustee Lorenzen that was seconded by Trustee Wake. Is there any other board discussion? Seeing none. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. And all those in favor of the motion on the floor, please indicate your vote by typing in yes or no, or Y or N. And if the two trustees by telephone could indicate their vote orally, thanks.
Vogel votes yes.
And Kendall votes yes.
Okay, we double check that that's everybody.
Chair Holland, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just wondered if the trustees, I feel amiss because I haven't provided you much detail or a follow-up on any of our previous discussion about goals or sort of progress on some of our action plans from this year. So I just wonder if I need to provide any written documentation that would help with the completion of the evaluation tool.
How about this, just as a response? Let's put something on an upcoming board meeting, kind of generally related to, at the January meeting, we also talked about having a meeting not necessarily related to your evaluation, to discuss, goals and expectations moving forward. So I think that would be a good topic for a board discussion. So, and maybe that would wrap around also just a report from you concerning what's happened so far and how we're moving forward. Do you think that would work?
Yeah, that definitely works for me. I just didn't know if there was more information that the trustees needed to complete the evaluation tool, but I know it's a pretty short turnaround too, so I don't want to add any more complications to the issue.
Would you be comfortable if trustees had a question, if they contact you?
Yes, for sure. By all means, that would be fine.
Okay. And also trustees feel free to contact me if that would be of any use as well. Any other trustee comments in light of that discussion? Seeing none, then we have a seconded motion and everyone has voted. And so public comment on non-agenda items. Anyone else have any comments? Who's a member of the public? Seeing none, well, thank you for making it through this meeting under unusual circumstances, and everyone have a good night, and we'll talk to you in a little bit. Thanks.
Thanks, Marcia, for leading it. Thanks for helping.
Thanks. I'm going to leave the meeting now.
Good night. Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Thank you, everybody. Nice job.